Hey everyone, how's it going? And welcome back to Drone Captured Moments. I'm David, and in today's video we're going to cover off nighttime photography. Happens to be one of my favourite times to shoot with a drone. Opens up a whole bunch of new creative options for everyone. And what I'd like to do today is just share some quick tips and hints of how you can really get the best out of nighttime photography with whatever drone that you use. And so all the tips I go through today, they'll be able to be utilised with any particular drone. So whether that be the Mini, the new Mini 3 if you're fortunate and you're watching this in a couple of weeks time, right up to the Maverick 3 and beyond. So as I say, all the tips I share today should help you really improve your nighttime photography. So if you look at the timestamps below, I'll cover off some of the main settings that I recommend that you utilise, just in terms of some of the on-screen settings, just to help you compose your shots, ensuring that you've got your exposure correct and you've not got any overexposure, things like that. And then also, if you look below, if you just want to straight to the photography settings in terms of what settings I actually utilise in terms of shutter speed and ISO, you can jump to that below as well. So if you're new here, please do consider subscribing, and if you do like this video, do give it a thumbs up. And I'd be interested to hear about your thoughts and what settings you utilise when you do some nighttime photography. So do feel free to comment below. Again, if you share some hints and tips, some others in the comments below might assist them, but also you might be able to help me improve my nighttime photography too. So feel free to put some comments below. So let's jump straight into it. So once you've got the app open, so you just go to the top right hand corner, select the options, and then the first thing I'll walk you through is just some of the on-screen settings that I like to utilise to help me when I'm trying to compose my nighttime photography shots. So the first thing I'll do is ensure that I've got the histogram turned on. That will just help you understand whether you're exposing for the shadows or exposing for the highlights. And then also what I like to do is then also turn on the auto exposure warning. The reason why that's quite useful in nighttime, which might seem ironic, is it will be really helpful if you've got any sort of light sources, whether that be street lights, whether that's light coming from buildings, or any signage that happens to be about. So you'll notice if you have any overexposure and that they're important to you, that you can then think about reducing your ISO or your shutter speed in a little bit, but we'll get to that shortly. Next thing I'll do is just turn on the grid lines. Again, that will just help you when composing your shots. So not specific for nighttime photography, but I find it useful to have the grid lines switched on. Just helps you if you want something centered, that you've got it centered. If you're using the rule of thirds, again, you can make sure you've got the relevant parts of your subject in the relevant third that you'd like, or you want them in those intersecting lines as well. I find that as a really good tip if you want to position something in an intersecting line. So that's where the vertical and horizontal lines cross. If you position your subject in one of those intersections, that's generally a good tip for composing your shot. I generally leave white balance set to auto. That can be changed in post-production. So again, you can change that in post. So now that I've got all my on-screen settings, how I like them, I'll move on now to some of the just pre-shot settings that I would recommend that you utilise. I would recommend that you shoot in 4/3. So again, back into the settings, go to select 4/3, and the reason I suggest that, if you shoot in 16:9, what that actually does is actually crops in to the 4/3 frame. So actually what you're actually losing is actually some of the picture. So you can always crop into 16:9, so you get a full picture with that 4/3, and then you can crop into 16:9 if you want. So in essence, basically, if you shoot in 4:3, you'll get the maximum amount of image possible with whichever sensor you're using, especially if you're using a DJI drone. And then the other setting that I'd recommend that you utilise, and it's probably one that you're aware of, is to shoot in RAW where possible. So again, back into the settings and utilise the RAW setting there. Again, the reason why that's useful is that it'll just give you the most information possible, which is very important, especially in nighttime, to make sure you've got as much information as possible, so when you're editing later, you've got more information to work with. actually moving on to the settings that I utilize when I'm shooting my photos at night. One of the top tips that I would recommend is when you're composing your shot, you just go into auto mode temporarily. So what that'll do, that'll make the image a lot brighter, so that will just help you with composing your shot, making sure that you've got your subject aligned how you'd like, making sure you've got nothing in the background sticking out, etc. behind, specifically like the Leather building here in Liverpool, there might be a crane that's jutting out of the back. I'd rather not have to edit that out later, so just jumping into auto lights up the image, and then I can see if there's anything that I don't want in the shot and make sure I compose my shot how I'd like it. So I'd recommend that, and then once you're ready, you can then just tap back into Pro mode, and then once you're in Pro mode, the settings that I would use for my shutter, I'd recommend a second. Anything really between a second and 1.6 seconds. Just think about the wind speed, so obviously if it's a very still evening, you can probably move up towards that 1.6 second mark. If it's a bit windy, you probably want to stay down by 1 second. And then in terms of ISO, the ISO I'd recommend is, again, try and keep that as low as possible. The reason for that, the higher the ISO, the more sensitive it becomes to noise, and that will introduce more noise into your images. So I'd recommend try and stay as low as possible. Generally stick between 100 and 200 for ISO. And with the shutter speed, why that's important, the longer it is, it just basically lets in more light. So in essence, the sensor in your camera, so in your drone, is getting more information. So that will be really helpful, and you'll see when we move on to editing these photos in the next video, by having that longer shutter speed and even still keeping your ISO quite low, you will get a lot more information, a lot more light to be able to really make you some vibrant nighttime photos. So there you go. So we've been through some hints and tips that will hopefully help you with your nighttime photography. So firstly, we went through some on-screen settings which will help you with composing your shots. So they'll both work in daytime and nighttime, obviously, but some settings to consider utilising. Then we moved on to some basic settings in terms of your photography settings. So utilising 4:3 aspect ratio, so that will give you the maximum image possible, especially on a DJI drone. And if you want to crop in afterwards, you can do that 60:9, etc. But whilst retaining the biggest possible image to work with. And then where possible, try and shoot in RAW. Again, that will just give you more information in post to work with, to be able to edit your photos. So where you can, do try and shoot in RAW. Then we moved on into some of the settings just in terms of for nighttime photography, specifically in terms of utilising ISO as low as possible, so ranging between 100 and 200, and then with your shutter speed, trying to keep that between 1 and 1.6 seconds, depending on the conditions. So do go out, give it a go, try those settings, and do play about with them. So adjust them accordingly, according to your conditions, according to what you're looking to get out of your particular shot that you're taking at that time. So if you're looking for, I suppose, light trails and you've got a moving light source, increase that shutter speed, because that will give you more opportunity to see that movement of that light source within your photo. So increase it. If you're not looking for any light trails and you do have moving subjects light sources, then consider keeping your shutter speed lower, so maybe around 1 second or lower. And again, just play about with the settings and see what really works for you and the conditions that you're working with. So go out, try them, join me in the next video where we'll be taking this photo, utilising the settings we discussed today, and editing it. And again, I'll share some hints and tips, what I find useful when editing my nighttime photos, to try and make them as vibrant as possible. So again, we'll do that together. So I hope you've liked this video today. If you have, please hit that like button. If you've not done so already, please consider subscribing. But thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.